The Haitian Revolution is one of the most overlooked events in modern history. The revolution lasted from 1791 to 1804, but its effects are still seen today. The Haitian Revolution is a large reason why Napoleon's French Empire eventually fell. It's a reason why the United States grew to the power it is today without the United States really having any impact whatsoever. And the impacts on the island of Hispaniola, they're still seen today too. This is the story of the Haitian Revolution, the most successful slave rebellion in modern history. In 1492, Spanish explorer Christopher Columbus famously embarked on his accidental quest to the Americas, landing on the shores of what is now Haiti in December of that year. Prior to European exploration, the islands of Hispaniola was populated by the native Taino tribes, which according to estimates from the University of Florida professor of anthropology William Keegan, saw a population ranging from 100,000 to upwards of 1,000,000 at the turn of the 16th century. Within 10 years of Columbus's arrival, the Spanish took strong control of the territory, establishing trade outputs and forcing the natives into slavery. Over the next century, these conditions forced the Taino into a genocide, as their group vanished from the island. Satisfied with their trade extraction, the Spaniards left the western part of the island in the middle of the 16th century, opening the door for French traders and pirates to set up outposts on the coast. After the presence of French traders and pirates on the island of Hispaniola in the later part of the 17th century, France wished to take control of the western part of the island, citing its natural resources. Following the 9 Years' War, Spain formally signed over the western third of the island to the French at the Treaty of Reykjavik, setting up what the French called Saint-Domingue as their newest territory. Around the time of the signing of the treaty, there was an estimated 5,000 imported slaves working in Saint-Domingue. These slaves worked on plantations producing sugarcane and other agricultural exports, making Saint-Domingue extremely profitable for white plantation owners. Over the next century, this number would grow to nearly 500,000. At its peak in the 1700s, it is estimated that close to 1 out of every 3 slaves exported from Africa landed on the shores of Saint-Domingue. In the late 18th century, Saint-Domingue consisted of 4 social classes. According to census estimates from the 1780s, enslaved people made up between 89 to 90% of the total population in Saint-Domingue, while white colonists only made up close to 6% of the total population in the territory. The remaining portion of the population was made up of free black and mulatto citizens, mulatto meaning mixed race. Yet, even with 90% of the population, the slaves lacked any real rights or say in Saint-Domingue, while the other classes enjoyed the economic benefits and freedoms, while the slaves worked in severe conditions on plantations. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, France saw a drastic change among its own social classes, as the first events in the French Revolution saw the lower classes in France rise against the powerful minority. This uprising terrified the slaveholders in Saint-Domingue, seeing tilted class demographics and potential rebellion. Although slave rebellions had occurred in Saint-Domingue over the previous century, none were ever large enough to be successful. According to C.L.R. James, a Caribbean historian and author of The Black Jacobins, the white ruling class tried to hide any information regarding the French Revolution, especially the Declaration of the Rights of Men, from the slaves in fear of imitation. Yet, even with these attempts to hide information from the slaves, Lewis reports that enslaved men would meet in secrecy in forests and at night to discuss a potential revolution in Saint-Domingue. 1790 saw tensions begin to rise among each social class in Saint-Domingue. Vincent Auguet, a free black man who lobbied in France for the rights of blacks in Saint-Domingue, returned home with weapons and attempted a slave uprising in the fall of 1790. After months of plotting a larger plan for an uprising, French authorities seized Auguet in February of 1791 and executed him. Wishing to ease tensions, the French revolutionary government attempted to offer citizenship to the free black and mulatto men on the island, yet this action further upsets the whites in Saint-Domingue. By the summer of 1791, tensions hit a burning point as an insurrection of over 10,000 slaves in the cul-de-sac plain worried white plantation owners across Saint-Domingue. By August, groups of slaves escaped their plantations to meet at the Bois Cayman to strategize a large-scale uprising and potential revolution. Following the summer of 1791, Saint-Domingue saw skirmishes between slaves and colonists across the territory. Further incidents of violence occurred, including the burning of Port-au-Prince in the aftermath of conflict between mulattoes and white colonists. Fighting ensued for the next 2 years as rebel forces made gains across the territory, forcing many prominent Europeans to flee the island of Hispaniola. Still, colonists contained rebel gains through treaties and agreements. Yet, by 1793, it looked as if the rebels could push the colonists off of the island. Perhaps the most prominent face of the Haitian Revolution was Toussaint Louverture, the son of a slave who became a leader in the rebel army. He formally joined the rebel army a few months into conflict and advocated guerrilla warfare. Louverture's leadership and general knowledge impressed his higher-ups, as his tactics and strategy propelled him up the ranks of the hierarchy of the rebel forces. Once fighting broke out between Spanish and French forces on the island in 1793, Louverture joined the Spanish forces and even gained the title of general in their army. By 1793, France was at war with both Spain and Britain, as all three empires had troops in Hispaniola. Hoping to win the support of rebel forces, French authorities encouraged the emancipation of slaves in Saint-Domingue. Black and mulatto forces in the southern part of Saint-Domingue initially allied with the British forces, hoping to drive the French off the island. Yet, by 1793, the generals of the rebel force aligned with the Spaniards. After gains to remove the French from the island, including the British capture of Port-au-Prince, Louverture once again flipped his allegiance, siding with the French after learning the Spaniards had no intentions of halting slavery on the island. This decision also came after the French National Convention abolished slavery in 1794, encouraging Louverture. By the end of 1795, Louverture's troops regained control of Port-au-Prince once again, and the Spaniards began to leave Saint-Domingue. After the Spanish left, the French and rebel combined troops fought the British for the remaining territory in western Saint-Domingue. Racial tensions on the island fizzled down, as Louverture pleaded for black and white inhabitants of the island to work together to defeat the British. In 1796, Louverture became the Governor-General of Saint-Domingue, holding power over all non-British occupied land in the territory. By spring of 1798, Louverture, with the help of mulatto General André Rigaud, forced the British into surrender and forced them off of Hispaniola. Rigaud controlled the mulatto army in the southern portion of Saint-Domingue, who eventually fought and lost to Louverture's army, leaving Louverture as the sole leader of Saint-Domingue at the time. Although French forces had made Louverture the Governor-General of Saint-Domingue, he still faced one last challenge. After taking control in France, Consul Napoleon Bonaparte wished to once again control Saint-Domingue and replace Louverture. Louverture's forces fought hard against the French forces, settling to a ceasefire in 1802. Yet, French forces violated this call for peace and even imprisoned Louverture, taking him to Europe, where he would die in 1803. Yet, even without Louverture, rebel forces, aided in a large way by a yellow fever outbreak that decimated French forces, kicked the French off of Hispaniola for good, forming the First Empire of Haiti on New Year's Day, 1804. Although it's not talked about in the glories of other revolutions in the Americas, the Haitian Revolution was one of the most influential events in modern history. The French loss of Saint-Domingue was one of the main reasons that Napoleon sold the Louisiana Territory to the United States, ending all French holdings in North America. The Haitian Revolution is the most successful slave rebellion in modern history, a spirit that Haitians still live by today. Thank you.